Welcome to the Ultimate Farm Wife podcast. On this channel, we're going to be discussing all things marrying a farmer, moving to the land, and becoming integrated with a family farming operation. Whether you're moving to the farm for the first time or whether you're moving back into a family farming operation, we discuss the ins and the outs of all of it. So let's jump into today's episode.
Hi everyone, it's Katja Williams, the Ultimate Farm Wife, jumping in at the beginning of this episode to be able to give a book review. This book review is the book that we will be discussing with its author in this week's podcast episode, which will wrap up season 6. The book we're reviewing today is the one he has written. This book explores what the top 5% of farmers are doing that the average farmer is not. And it's packed with insights that can transform your approach to farming. So whether you are a farmer, a farm wife, whether you are first generation farmers or you are multi-generational farmers, is a great read and will help along the way. One of the standout features of this book is that it is easy to read, well formatted, and well laid out. Jack has done a great job of making complex concepts accessible and actionable for everyone. This book is filled with practical and relevant examples showing exactly how to apply the outlined principles to your day-to-day farming activities. I love that it's broken down this way. As you know, I am a very practical person. I love breaking things down. I love applying things, and this book really does that. A particular compelling aspect of this book is the focus on generational changes in farm businesses. From my experience in over 60 plus podcast episodes based around family farming businesses, I frequently encounter the reoccurring idea and theme that the older generation of a farm struggles to separate their identity from the farm, and that, they are not the farm. This concept is explained really well in this book and offers strategies to be able to differentiate yourself from your farm and why that's important. Ensuring a healthy separation of personal identity and business is how these top 5% are really achieving their goals. The chapters are thoughtfully broken down into the main principles that Jack has found to be key contributors to successful and personal family farming businesses. This structure makes it easy to follow and implement the advice that is being given in the book that is suitable for you. Overall, You Are Not Your Farm is well worth a read. It is well worth you and your partner reading, whether you are looking to improve yourself, your farming practices, or even the relationship of general transition in family farming businesses. Now we'll jump into today's episode. Hi, and welcome to the farm. Today's episode, we're talking with Jack, the author of You Are Not Your Farm. Hi, Jack.
G'day, Katja. Thanks for having me.
Jack, can you start by telling us a little bit about yourself, your family, your farm, and then why you wrote this book?
Yeah, so I'm Jack. I farm 30 k's west of Ballarat in Victoria, family farm. So it was my parents' farm originally, and I took over. I come back to the farm in 2017. Got told to leave the farm and explore life outside. So I'm an electrician by trade. Came back to the farm. I got a partner, Bonnie, who has her own business off farm, Gathered Events, is a wedding planning business, and I think the two complement each other quite well. And so a little bit of background on why the book came to fruition. I was 2 years into being back on the farm and looking back across those previous 2 years, quite unhappy and dissatisfied with what I had achieved and where I was at. And I thought, my initial thought was, is this farming? And is this what I have to just get used to? And so I made a decision to seek out as many farmers as I could to ask them, what they were doing that I was missing. And I looked searched high and low to find what I would call successful farmers. And I was only implementing it all for myself, so it was all selfish. All I wanted to do was be successful, and I've been given an opportunity to run this business. I didn't want to let anyone down. That was probably the key thing. And through that, I started seeing results personally and in the business, and a few little comments from people. They could see some things change as well. And I was looking back over my notes one night, and I thought, well, if this has the ability to help me as much as it did, it has the potential to help a lot of other farmers. So that's where I started to write the book. It stayed as a draft for quite some time, just wondering if it was worth it or not. A lot of self-doubt in that, but once I got over that, I put it out there, and it's been quite successful in its first 3 months so far.
Yeah, absolutely. I've read the book twice, as we said off air. The first time was for, my own self-gain as well, when you sent me a copy of the book, but also then I read back for the community. And one of the first things that popped out when I was reading it in the mindset of the community for the Ultimate Farm Wife is that you have written, we've all made the choice to be on farm, whether that is through family or generations, marriage, or starting up with a passion project and farming for the first time. I think that really encompasses not only the audience of your book, but the audience for this channel as well. And I love that you do talk about your journey as you started this interview off as well, like what we can do to start personally to help being back on farm or help moving to the farm, and the mindsets and the chapters are broken down really beautifully. So what were some of the main things you noticed when you were talking to other farmers that really helped you change that mindset from, is this what farming is and do I just have to get used to it, to now being passionate about the farm again and being back to, being really happy with who you are and where you're at?
Yeah, so the number one thing, and that's where the title come from, "You Are Not Your Farm," is the idea that the farm is actually the vehicle used to get to where you want to get to, and having aligned goals outside of the farm, especially as a couple, knowing that the farm is the vehicle we're using to get to where we want to get to. So the other question around that is, well, what does the farm have to do to get us to where we want to get to? That's the biggest mindset shift that I had once I started talking to these other farmers. So detaching your value and your worth from your farming outcomes. Yes, farming has its ups and downs. There's a lot we cannot control in the farming environment. But if we're all on the same page and know where we want to get to, makes it so much easier to make those unemotional decisions towards the farming business. And that's for the greater good of the business versus massaging our ego.
Yeah, absolutely. So values is definitely something I don't think a lot of us think about on a daily basis. Like, I know when we sit down and we do some sort of business planning or something, we talk about, goal setting for the business and the farm, but we're adding on an extra layer on that, aren't we? We're adding our own personal goals that align with the farm goals, and to make sure that they're both coherent and working alongside each other, and we're reviewing those daily, aren't we?
Yeah, definitely. So I think that value setting, that's where you really ask those questions that you probably actually never asked yourself before. What do I want life to look like in, say, for example, 20 years' time? How old am I? How old are the kids? And what do we want to be doing with our lives at that particular point in time? And that's where you can derive your values from. And that actually sets up the next question on, what does the farm actually need to do to get us there? So it's all value driven. So if you have value driven goals, it's so easy to review business models of farms and set farms up to actually perform the way you want them to perform, rather than farming the way we have for 3 or 4 generations and thinking it's the only way.
Yeah, absolutely. And by aligning with that, that's where you've found, your passion, and where you found, I'm actually re-enjoying farming rather than just going along with the way that things have been. I really like that. I enjoy the way the book is set out as well. So, guys, if you don't have a copy of the book in front of you, you've got beautifully broken down chapters which have great applied farming examples so that you can actually think, oh, that's how it works. Because how many times have we read a self-help book or a farming book and then been like, well, that's great, but how does that apply to me? Jack does a great job at that. And then at the end of each chapter, he's broken, your key takeaways down as well. And it's definitely a book that you can go back and keep reading. And, we've just spoken about value setting and aligning, your farm with everything, which is outlined in the first part of the book. And that's really important to, what you can take away from the book and how you can apply it to yourself. So the mindset changes, Jack. When you were visiting the different farmers and their farms, what kind of questions were you asking them? And were some of their responses really surprising?
The first challenge was getting them to talk. Farmers have this really interesting stigma that nothing leaves the boundary fences. And I'm not sure where that comes from. Like, I never knew it to be true. So I was quite shocked when, you get turned down. And so you have to, so for me, in talking to these farmers, I had to find common grounds on where I could start a conversation and then lead that into the deeper stuff. But essentially, once you break that barrier, I didn't have to ask many questions because it just spewed out of them that they knew I was speaking a different language and talking at a higher level. I didn't go in there asking, well, what type of sheep do you run or what type of crops do you grow? And that's the essence of this book, that it actually isn't about how to grow great crops or finer wool or fatter cattle or anything like that. It's based on the farmer themselves. So it's the person who's behind the farm. And maybe some of them actually hadn't been asked those questions before and were keen to just let it out. Especially if you tell a farmer that you think they're successful, they sort of think, oh, wow, I'll dive deeper into this and I'll tell you what I'm doing. So no particular questions that I actually asked them to get the answers out. It was just finding those common grounds. And then once they realised that I was there for something else rather than what type of crops they grew, it just naturally came out. It was quite easy.
Yeah. I think that's really important, is breaking down, those barriers and getting them to talk. And then also, giving that space for them to be like, oh, let me think about this question for a minute. And yes, I know the answer. Like, it's not something that they would normally be answering as well. So that's great. So what was one of the most surprising details that a farmer gave you that you then had to go away and think about it and then be like, actually, that is a gem? Like, I'm sure there was lots of them, but is there one that stands out in particular?
Yeah, it was right at the start. So when I went on this journey, right at the start, I thought, okay, what I want to do is work out timing of operations, what enterprises I should be running, how to do all that, some business fundamentals, our cost of production, business model, debt to equity ratio, all those types of things. I thought farmers are just going to tell me what KPIs I need to follow, and then I'll be right. I'll go home and I'll just focus on them. That was what I intended to get. But what I got was like the absolute opposite. And I didn't understand at the start. So I hadn't heard of all these ideas around molding your business to your life rather than molding your life to your business. And at the time, my life was my business. My life was the farm. So that's what, you wake up 7 days a week and farm. That's all you got to do. That's all you can do. But that's probably the turning point where those uncommon answers started to creep in. And as I dove deeper into them, it was like opening this set of doors that I'd never been through before. And once you understand it and start asking more questions around these uncommon answers, which are, what the chapters are pretty much based around, our focus, the story we tell ourselves, gratitude, legacy, all those types of things, vulnerability as well. Once I walked through those doors, it's so common in highly successful business owners that I was like, this is the space I need to be in. This is something that isn't spoken about in farming enough, and it's very uncommon for the farmer to talk about this stuff. So that was the moment where I was like, yep, this is it. This is what I need to focus on, rather than diving down on how much our drench costs and see if I can get it cheaper somewhere else.
Yeah. I think what the chapters and the breakdowns and the key gems that you've just mentioned in there is so important, particularly to the Ultimate Farm Wife community, because so often when I'm talking to community members, especially if they're not from a background of farming, those key components that you were chasing to start with, like commodity prices and KPIs and everything else, is where they think they need to start as well. And I know when I first moved to the farm, that's where I was thinking, well, that's the knowledge gap I need to find. But then we're still finding, as a lot of people in the community, I still don't feel like I fit. I still don't feel like I'm really getting the most out of being here on farm, particularly when your roles change, particularly when kids come on board. And I really think, that those key aspects that you talk about in the book really help you find your place on farm and help transition into, the farming business and being comfortable with that. Because, we go, oh, we've got to be uncomfortable in the business while we're learning the business to be able to really learn. But sometimes you've got to pull yourself back a little bit and be like, no, what are we happy with? What are our values? And jump back into those key gems you've just mentioned. I think another part of your book, which I really appreciated reading and telling myself back, is when you talk about, is your farm running you or are you running your farm? Because that is a pretty big difference and a big mindset change. And I think that will help the community a lot. So can you explain a little bit about that and why it's so important to distinguish the difference and how we swap it around?
Yeah, exactly. So if we break it down, a farm is a business, and a business has to pay everyone for its labour input. So how often do we see farmers just taking drawings here and there and whatever's at the end of the year? Oh yeah, that's pretty good. We had a good year. I can, we might be able to buy that caravan, or we might be able to buy the boat, or whatever you do with those profits is up to you.
Yeah.
That's where we say is the business. Where I say is the business running you, or are you running your business? We have to create the business that gives us the freedom to do what we want to do, and that means we need to have a business that can pay us a wage. That's ultimately what it is. If you're not taking a wage out of your farm, there's something wrong with your business model. So I would look at that as number one. And it's just the mindset around, okay, well, if I want to take a wage out of this business, what does the farm have to do to give me that? Because you don't go to work a 9 to 5 and say, oh, don't worry about paying me. At the end of the year, if there's anything left over, I'll just take it out of that. That's fine. And if I need fuel along the way, I'll just fill it up at the diesel bowser out the back. And, we've got, you got an account down at the shop. I'll just put my lunch on that every Friday. We don't do that normally. So why do we allow ourselves as farmers to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Couple of key points within that I did want to address. The first thing is, like, if you're someone who's married into the farming business and you're not quite up to that stage where you can be having that chat with your in-laws, or the farm isn't quite ready to change their business structure because they've been happy farming in it for a while, what's a mindset change that we can make that doesn't necessarily change the business structure to be able to still incorporate that main mindset?
Yeah, I think it's understanding what you want to get out of it. What do you want to get out of life? Like, I know for a fact I don't want to be working, till I'm 80, and then my retirement plan is to sell the farm.
Yeah.
That's not what I want. So I think it's all about communication. If you're coming into a farming business, I think you got to look at it as you're an asset to the business, and how can you give value to this business? And if setting a plan forward on what you actually want from this business is your value adding to it, that's huge, because it's very frustrating and it's very common in farming families that the next generation actually don't know what's going on. And no one has a conversation. It's all taboo. We don't want to start any fights or anything like that. And like, I don't understand. I feel sorry for them that they have to go through that. But it's all about communication. Okay, well, older generation, what do you want? You know, are you going to be here till you're 80? Okay, well, how do we fund that, and how do we get around that? And then what do we want? So you might have, you know, mum and dad, and then you two, the next generation underneath. What is a farm business? What can the farm potentially look like to give the four of us what we want? So communication is key. And they're questions that older generation probably don't think of, you know, and it's from their previous generations as well. Well, I didn't get the farm until my parents passed away, so that's just how it is. It'll be left to you, don't worry. But it's no point living your life till you're 50 and going, oh, we might get it, you know, in the next few years, hopefully. And then we got to start from ground zero and work from there. You're better off, if that is the succession plan to pass down the land, better off getting it in a position where it actually can do that. It's good for the business to do that. And you're already hit the ground running. You're not starting at ground zero and going, oh, we've sat here for 20 years wanting to implement all these plans, and now we get our chance now.
Yeah, absolutely. Because guaranteed by the time you sort of get to that age bracket as well, your kids are starting to want to take over and you think, well, I've only just got it.
Yeah, exactly right. And your risk appetite changes a lot as well. So, you know, if you can do it before kids, or like, you know, before boarding school or anything like that, I think you've got to have those forward planning discussions, especially if you got, like I was talking to a farmer this morning who's planning ahead for kids at boarding school. And that's expensive. There's no point getting there and then asking the question, well, how do we do it? You know, if you can ask that question 10 years before it happens, you know, how do we do it and what do we have to do? That's a really good question to ask, rather than just waiting for the time to come and hoping for the best.
Yeah. And when we're talking about that older generation as well, like I know you cover it slightly in the book as well, but their identity is connected to the farm. Like there is no difference between who they are and what the farm is. So sometimes that's where some of those complications and holdbacks can come from. So when we're trying to set ourselves up to be something different to that identity, that's where we talk about you've got the farm and you've got yourself and your values. So, I mean, usually when we come to talk to the older generation, they're not wanting to have those discussions. And we can still align our values and what we want to do alongside that farming model that's currently running. So we can still be operating in the family farm under, you know, the previous generation when they've still got control, but you can still start implementing these different things to make sure that you are not falling in the same trap of your identity being the farm and its successes are your successes. Like you can have individual successes outside the farm as well. So, Jack, how do you integrate that into being, you know, that mind shift that we're talking about?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, that combination between the older and younger generation. Look, you got to stick to your own. My personal view on it is you have to stick to your own lane, create your own life, and if you're in that business, you can still create your own personal values from that and what you're getting out of the farm. How long you can do that for, if there is a misalignment. Businesses don't operate for an extended period of time with misalignment. So that's probably another question you need to ask yourself: is this the right place? And what does the future look like here? Because you've got your own family to consider in that decision, and it's awkward and it's messy and it might not be as nice as you want it to be. But you do have to ask yourself those questions. And as uncomfortable as it is, you know, I don't hide behind the fact that you have to probably ask them. Yeah.
And Jack, if you're having to ask those questions or there is a misalignment, you go into further chapters of your book about, getting a coach and getting a mentor. Is that where you think that is where that can sort of stem from? Is that when you need to start getting coach and mentor, or should you be getting one into the farm before you start coming up against those hard questions?
Yeah, I think mentors are such a great asset to any business. Like even on farm operational things, all I do is find someone personally who's doing something I want to do, and then just pick their brains. So I use mentors more on a operational side of things, and I've got one mentor who's very good at business and has very successful businesses, and I utilize him as a way of growing business for me. For the coach side of things, coaches, I've had a business coach and I've got one now, and it's all about accountability. That's the biggest thing. They're not consultants. They don't tell you how to run your business or anything like that. If I'm struggling with something and I come up with a solution, they hold me accountable to doing it. So that's where the coach fits in. And my business wouldn't be what it is today if I didn't have a coach, because it's so easy on a farm to not do things and say to yourself, oh, that'll be right, we'll do it next time, or do it later, or that's not important. We'll do the budget when the bank manager rings, sort of thing. But yeah, the coach, he's all around that accountability. And if I'm saying I'm setting up, a forecast budget for the next 12 months on this date, and if it's not sent to the coach the next day, I've got a pretty angry person on the end of the line.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that accountability part is really important, and you can use that not only as in my personal accountability, but you can also bounce ideas off the farm, particularly if it's intergenerational and accountability is not being kept with someone who's making the decisions. Like, you can bounce those ideas back off your mentors and back off your coaches as well, because one theme, particularly in the female farmers and the farm wives I've been talking about in the community, is when accountability is not accepted by someone in the farm. A lot of to generalize, I will say, a lot of the females on the farm feel like they need to take up that accountability strain, and that then starts weighing on them when all those excuses are coming through, when they're trying to problem solve and they're trying to fix and they're trying to hold all that accountability up themselves. So girls, females, sorry, generalizing, you can get a coach and mentor yourself without having to just have one for the farm. And that will help as well, because they're four different parts of the business.
If you're enjoying listening along with us today and learning some tips, tricks, and advice, then please like, subscribe, and even share this interview with someone who you think would need to hear this information, or who might benefit from other interviews done right here on this channel. Now let's get back into today's episode.
Jack, you've mentioned previously in our chat, and it is a big part of your book, gratitude, creating really good gratitude practices on farm, whether you are the farmer, whether you are the farm wife, whatever other role you have in the business, is so important in integrating into a family farming business. So can you tell me what you discovered about gratitude, why it's important, and how to set up a gratitude practice that is going to benefit you and the farm in the long run?
Yeah, definitely. So as farmers, we are very future focused. A new shed here, new yards there, new header. We need all these new things, but sometimes we don't realise the resources that we've actually got and the value of those resources, either monetary or non-monetary. And we don't give them enough credit of what we've actually got and how far we've actually come to get them so far. And when you get caught up in always looking forward to the next thing. You know, we need this, we need that. You lose sight of what you've actually got. And it's so important to keep that focus on what you've got, because none of us are guaranteed tomorrow. That's the biggest thing. And it's good to have a wish list. And I've got plenty of I've got plenty on my wish list. But I always bring it back to, okay, what have I got today? You know, I slept in a warm bed last night. I got up. You know, I could go outside, have brekkie. I've got facilities that make life so easy on the farm. And that's one thing I didn't realise at the start, is how much you have to actually focus on what you've got. For me, the routine at the start was just walking around and going, like, that new fence, like, it's so good to have that new fence, because now I don't get those phone calls of sheep out on the road. Like, that's as simple as it is. And I go into it a little bit more in the book, but it's simply just going, yeah, we've got a big stack of wood and we're warm of a night time, and we can all be in the lounge room as a family together. We're nice, warm, comfy, and we can put on Netflix.
Yeah.
You know, we're so lucky. Like, I heard a thing the other day, no one had a hot shower 50 years ago. So, like, how comfortable are our lives today compared to what our grandparents went through?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you quoted Tony Robson in your book, where, you know, energy flows where attention goes. And so definitely having those gratitude built into your routine is so important. So many times we go out, you know, we wake up in the morning and we go, right, we've got to do X, Y, and Z, but taking, you know, you've got that job list, but taking a moment, you know, either alongside that job list or going for a walk in the morning or doing something else and just noticing the positives, or even if it's just getting breakfast on the table. Aren't we lucky to have been able to have these groceries and feed my family, and everyone has clothing, and the night before, as you said, everyone's had a hot shower and the house is still warm because we've got all that wood. Like, it's really nice to be able to add that gratitude in, and it's such a simple step, but I think it's it's something that does get missed, particularly when we get busy, particularly if that's not the farming setup that, you know, we've come across in. We can focus on the negatives and we can focus on what we've got to do, but bring that back a little bit, I think, is so important, and you touch on that beautifully in the book as well. I think we've actually covered most of the questions that I had written down for the book. So, Jack, is there anything else that you would add to the rural mum community about how these key learnings that you have learnt, that you have put into your book, can really benefit those who are either marrying into a family farming business or who are going back into the family farming business? Because this book not only helps, you know, that first moving to the farm, but also helps, okay, I've moved back into my family farming business, and now I need to make sure that I'm comfortable in the conversations that I'm going to have with my parents. Let's get a confidence base. Let's work out where I'm going, so I've got a really strong platform to have those discussions. So is there anything else that you would add to the community based on that?
Yeah, the one thing I'll add is you won't be able to force this on anyone. So, you know, you can work so hard on yourself and get frustrated with the people around you. But if you focus on self first, and that's all you focus on, the rest will follow. And people around you will start to see the improvements and start to ask questions. Oh, you know, I've noticed a change in you in the last 3 months, or I've noticed this with you in the last 6 months. And that's where your actions will speak louder than words once you start working on yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, guys, this is a really great book to read. Jack, where can we find a copy of your book? I'll add everything in the show notes as well.
Thank you. So Facebook or Instagram, You Are Not Your Farm, or head across to Amazon and search You Are Not Your Farm, and it's there, available to purchase there.
Beautiful. Excellent. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. Everyone, if you are wanting to know what the top 5% of farmers are doing that average farmers are not, and this will help you move to the farm for the first time or move back into a family farming business, or even buy a copy. Christmas is coming up very soon, so grab yourself a copy or your husband one and pop it on his nightstand. And I'll talk to you all very soon.